Please put in your notebooks, note to self, never follow Rosanna Rosado, because how could anybody possibly top her presentation? See? You're even having trouble sitting down. It was so exciting. So I'm planning to shine and I need your help. Ever heard that before? Ladies, I'm planning to shine, but I need your help. So sit down. Thank you. So let's get started because I know you've got a really busy day and I want to make sure you get it all in. Welcome to this panel, which is called Women in Tech, What You Need to Know. You're all here because you're leaders. It was a pleasure to hear you introduced before. What we want to accomplish today is to get you thinking about how tech fits into your world as leaders, and to offer some practical tips on what you should be thinking about right now while you're still in school. And we couldn't have any better a panel than we do today. They're going to give you a personal perspective on their careers and a little bit of a focus on what they wish they knew back then. There are two things that I want you to be listening for. The first is careers are not linear. You don't choose a major and then step foot on a path and then it leads you to a job and everything happens in a very direct way. It's really much more like a roller coaster, not only ups and downs, but lots of twists and turns along the way. As you heard from Rosanna this morning, did she plan on being the Secretary of State for New York State? No, she did not. But that's where her career took her, and with her extraordinary skills, she's made it all work, not only for herself, but for all of us in New York. I majored in English. I have a BA, a master's, a PhD, all in English, and I've spent my entire career in tech. So in fact, I often do say I've never had a job I was prepared for. So consider me one of those poster children for nonlinear careers. The second thing I want you to be listening for is the interdisciplinarity of tech. It doesn't matter whether your major is psychology or political science or English. Tech sort of underlies the world that we live in, and it also underlies every profession. So whether you're going to be a doctor or an investment banker or a teacher or a musician or a pharmacist, whatever it is, tech is going to be a part of your life, and your competitiveness as you go off into the job market is going to be dramatically enhanced if there is tech in your preparation. So those are the two things that I'd like you to be listening for. I'm going to introduce our speakers in a second, but first I want to give you just a little bit of background on what's happening here at CUNY. You know how enormous CUNY is. You are part of its magic 24 campuses, 470,000 students. And with that comes enormous potential to have an impact on what has become the most vibrant part of the New York City economy, and that is tech. There are 34,000 students studying in technology areas here at CUNY right now. That includes everything from computer science to engineering, communications technologies. And CUNY alumni are extremely well represented already in tech in New York. There's about 31,500 of them in New York right now, CUNY alums working in tech. So when you think about your next steps in your career and you're looking out for a mentor, make sure you sign up for LinkedIn and start looking for some of your fellow CUNY alums to help you on your way. By the way, that's more than NYU, Columbia, and most of the New York schools put together, 31,500. So that's a little bit of background. This is the role I play now. I stepped down almost about a year ago as Dean of Macaulay Honors College at CUNY. Anybody from Macaulay in the house? Ooh, thank you. But of course, Macaulay is at 8 of the campuses in New York. So a warm greeting to everybody. Let me tell you about the astonishing three ladies on my left. Lauren Anderson is the executive director of the New York City Tech Talent Pipeline, which is Mayor de Blasio's signature initiative to support the growth of the tech ecosystem by delivering quality talent for the city's businesses and quality jobs for New Yorkers. In this capacity, she works with the city's leading tech employers, academic institutions, and training providers to provide new and expanded training and education solutions and to develop policy and systemic interventions. Before she came to the City of New York, Lauren served as a policy advisor in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, where she worked on initiatives to broaden participation in science, tech, engineering, and math, STEM, STEM fields, and also served as a liaison to the White House Council on Women and Girls. Thanks, Lauren. Jane Chwick is co-founder and co-CEO of Trewtec, Inc., providing corporate directors, chief executive officers, and chief technology officers with the information they need to improve the oversight of their company's technology functions. Before she created Trewtec, Jane was a partner at Goldman Sachs, where she worked for 30 years in tech, including most recently as co-chief operating officer, co-COO of the technology division, where she was responsible for financial and business planning, setting technical strategy, and management of 8,000 people in tech. I bet a lot of them were not women, huh? We'll talk about that later. She also serves on a number of boards for not-for-profit and businesses, including Voya Financial and Market Access, where she chairs technology and innovation and operations. She's also a member of the board of the Queens College Foundation. Thank you. She is an undergraduate in mathematics from Queens College. She was until recently also a director of Girls Who Code. And she has an MBA from St. John's University. Thank you, Jane. And moving on to Judy Spitz. She's a Verizon executive in residence. She's actually the Verizon, right? Because there is no other, right? She is the Verizon executive in residence at Cornell Tech, where she leads an initiative that is near and dear to my heart, the Women in Technology and Entrepreneurship Initiative in New York, otherwise known as WiTNY. And if you want to hashtag anything WiTNY today, we'd love it, WiTNY. It's a partnership between CUNY, Cornell Tech, and a growing list of corporate partners, and we all share a single mission, and that is to encourage and increase the participation of women in tech and entrepreneurship. And Judy's going to talk to us about how we're doing that. Before that, she was Senior Vice President and CIO, Chief Information Officer at Verizon. She has a PhD from the City University of New York, another CUNY alum, in speech and hearing sciences, and she also served as an adjunct professor right here at Hunter College. Judy's interest is driving programs that address the urgent need for more women in tech and topics relating to the leadership skills needed in the information economy. So thank you very much to all of our panelists. Lauren, I'd like to start with you and hear a little bit about your background and also what you're doing in the mayor's office.
Sure. Well, thank you, Anne. And also thank you, Presidents Rob and Keese, for hosting and opening this up to us today. It is, as an aside, great to be here at Hunter. I don't want you all to think that I am a CUNY outsider. My grandmother actually helped to establish the master's degree in teaching here at Hunter, and my aunt went to Hunter, and my mom went to CCNY. Are there any city colleges? Hey! Okay, great. So CUNY and CUNY schools are very near and dear to my heart. It is so great to be here with all of you. And I wanted to start by reinforcing something that Anne said, which is you really never know where you're going to wind up. Degree paths or career paths are completely nonlinear. If someone had told me when I was in your shoes that one day, not too far in the future, I would be leading a mayoral initiative, working day in, day out with 150 employer partners across New York City to define their needs, develop the education and training solutions that would meet their needs, and work together to scale all of those things that are working throughout the city's 1.1 million public school students, 125 higher ed institutions, $500 million public workforce. I would have looked at you like you had just told me I was going to be a brain surgeon, which I was on no path to be as well. because I actually started as a film major when I was in your shoes. And I worked on the technical side of film back when cameras didn't work off of chips. They worked off of mini DV tapes. I don't know that any of you would maybe remember that. And it was not too long ago. And really didn't even realize that that technical underpinning for that role was going to be a recurring theme that I would come across again and again. After I worked in film, I actually decided to completely change my career path and start working on a campaign in Florida. This was back when political campaigns were just starting to figure out how technology could really drive their ability to talk to voters through A/B testing, through more targeted field testing of who had particular interests, who was likely to vote or not vote. And today that is standard operating practice for campaigns. And so it was a really exciting time to be doing that as well. But after that campaign ended, I really didn't know what I wanted to do and decided to continue to move on in the area of public service and wound up in DC, working for the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, as Anne mentioned, where I fully came to appreciate the role that technology plays in helping society solve our most pressing problems, from the cures for the diseases that ail us, to the built environment that surrounds us, to our ability to relate and sustain the natural environment, to explore space, to any number of millions of things that we are engaging with on a day-to-day basis and exploring and discovering. Tech really underpins so much of that in so many different ways. And it was fascinating to see how policy and policymakers can play a large role in helping to foster the smart expansion and use of technology in myriad different ways. While I was there, I also came to appreciate how few people actually participate in this amazingly high potential, rewarding enterprise of tech, whatever it looks like. And particularly how few women and people of color are engaged in the process. So I was very fortunate. Valerie Jarrett and Tina Chen, who's the First Lady's Chief of Staff, welcomed me onto the Council of Women and Girls to be their staff liaison to work specifically on how do we get more women engaged in science, technology, engineering, and math. And we did so many things that I was so proud of, including launching an international effort with many different countries to be able to expand opportunities for women, not just here in the States, but abroad as well. And after 3.5 years, I was thinking of where I could have potentially even more impact, hard to think of that, and decided there was no better place to come than to a city government. And here in New York City, we are also fortunate to work and operate in 5 boroughs connected that have such tremendous resources, capacity to impact lives at a scale that is greater than many countries, which is phenomenal. And so now, on a day-to-day basis, I am able to utilize the various skills that I developed along the way and perspectives that I developed along the way to work together with employers and with people across New York to ensure that New Yorkers are getting the skills they need to be able to fill tech jobs of all sorts here in the city. And there is no better time for it. The tech sector here in New York is nearly 300,000 people strong. It accounts for $30 billion in wages annually. And there is a tremendous opportunity. Companies are hungry for folks who can solve problems, who can think on their feet creatively, who are able to communicate, who are able to interact, who are able to use and pick up skills and learning to learn. But companies have a real hard time finding New Yorkers who can fill those shoes, and New Yorkers are having a hard time accessing those jobs. So what we have done is recognize the power of technology for not just to solve problems for those around us, but really to be a pathway for individuals to be able to access the middle class and to be able to spur economic development here in the city. That's why the mayor launched the Tech Talent Pipeline in May of 2014, and I look forward to talking a little bit more about that and what it means for the city.
Thanks. Jane, over to you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Anne, for organizing this and inviting me to speak on this panel. As Ann said, I actually am I'm a female technologist, and I was a graduate from a CUNY school. I graduated from Queens College. But more importantly, 5 years ago, I was asked to be a member of the Queens College Foundation, which was amazing to me because I had over 25 years of being disconnected from the school, and to come back and to see the school from different eyes and to be part of giving back and enriching the education of the students is one of the best things I have done in my career, so I really enjoy that. But we're not here to talk about that. We're actually here to talk about the importance of technology in the world and in everyone's future. I'm a great case study for this topic. So let's start at the beginning when I first started at Queens College. I wanted to be a doctor. So I was a pre-med student, and that was going really well for the first 3 weeks. When I realized that this wasn't going to be for me. So I stepped back, with having the pressure of what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I thought about being an architect. I thought about being an actuary. I thought about being a teacher, and then I decided to take a computer science class. This story doesn't end up the way you think it's going to. So I take a computer science class, and at the time, you'd get an assignment, you go to class, you get an assignment to write a program, and at the time, programs were written on something called punch cards, which you probably never even heard of. But what you'd do is you'd write your program on a piece of paper, and you'd type up the punch card, and you'd have a deck of these punch cards about this big, and you'd go wait online for an hour. You'd finally be your turn, you'd hand over your punch cards. God forbid you dropped your punch cards along the way because sequence mattered. And the next day, you'd go and you'd pick up your punch cards. And if any of you ever wrote a program, you know that you never get that program to work on the first try, or the second try, or the third try, and sometimes even the ninth or 10th try was still a problem. And so imagine 9 days in a row, 10 days in a row of repeating this. And it wasn't very much fun, and it wasn't challenging. And at the end of the semester, I said, I am never going to touch another computer again as long as I live. So I decided to major in math. Math came easy to me. I didn't have to read any books, which was really great, big plus. But I still didn't know what I wanted to do. Back to, I think you see a common theme here about college and then what you end up doing. Roll forward to my senior year. So I'm a senior, and I was getting married that August. My husband was still a student, so I had to find a job so we could eat. And I was applying to, very confident, by the way, I could get any kind of job, and I applied to job doing sales and marketing, or applied to jobs, for finance or operational roles, and I didn't get any of those, but I landed a job in technology as a programmer. That's what we called software developers back then, programmers. I got a job with EDS, which was a technology company that actually had a really great technology training program. So they trained me to be a software developer. Eventually, we moved back to New York to New York City when my husband graduated from college, and that's when I got a job at Goldman Sachs. And I spent 30 years there programming, being a software developer and working my way through the ranks. And that might sound like I always did the same thing, but I can tell you for a fact that every day was different, and every week and every year. Sometime in the 80s, PCs were created and started coming into the workforce. So before then, when traders did a trade, they would do the trade on the phone, and then they would write the details of the trade on a piece of paper. They would roll up that piece of paper, put it in something called a vacuum pack, and vacuum it to a different floor where an operations person would process and clear that trade. Sometime in 1987, we started bringing in PCs, and we would start writing trading systems for traders to enter their trades. And we'd have to have races with them, by the way, to prove to them that it was faster for them to enter the trade on the PC than for them to write it. And they could see the value of having their position being updated automatically once they entered that trade, and operations could start working on it right away. But Goldman Sachs was tiny back then. I mean, it was really, really small. We were really mostly based in New York, and we traded in very few things, and we didn't have a lot of businesses. And in those 30 years, we became global. We entered many, many businesses. We brought technology into many functions. And as we did that, and as we grew, I got the opportunity to build technology for many functions, for many businesses. And so I wasn't just a technologist. I became a trading person because I had to understand trading to build technology for them. I became an HR person because I had to understand how HR worked to build technology for HR. And I can go on and on and on through the functions of the firm. And I got to learn about all those functions as I built the technology for them. That was really exciting. And 30 years flew, right? And I didn't want to, I was exhausted. I couldn't do this anymore. I wanted to change my life and not work at the intensity that I was working through that time period. And so about 4 years ago now, time flies, I retired. And retiring from Goldman doesn't mean I didn't want to go work for another company because I was exhausted, but I didn't want to do nothing. And so my technology foundation has opened up so many doors for me. I am on corporate boards of different industries because, again, my technology and my ability to learn, I can add value to the different industries and sit as a director on those boards. I worked with a couple of startups that had nothing to do with finance, and that was a lot of fun. And they weren't, everything is a technology company, right? So they weren't building technology for the sake of technology. They were building technology to be as a recruiting platform. That was an amazing experience, and it was my technology foundation that did that for me. So what am I telling you all of this for? You know, as we heard from Anne and from Lauren, your career is going to go down a lot of paths. I'm sure there are some of you in this room who think you know what you want to do after college, and some of you don't. And those of you who think you know what you do, I guarantee you there is a large percentage of you who will not do that thing. So as you look at your college experience, as you look at the years you have ahead of you, you need to think about it as it's a foundation. And the classes that you should select should be about teaching you foundational things, teaching you how to learn, right? Math did that for me. It taught me how to learn. But today's world is very different from 30 years ago. And having a technology foundation is really important. So whether you major in computer science or not, you really should take a lot of computer science classes in your years ahead, because that will provide an amazing foundation so that as your career takes right turns, left turns, straight turns, backward turns, it doesn't matter what turn, you're prepared to excel in it. And so with that, turn it over to Judy.
Okay, good morning, everybody, and again, thank you, Anne, for including me. Let me tell you a little bit about my background, and then I want to spend most of the time talking about this thing we call WiTNY that Anne and I and a growing group of others are very passionate about. Like several people on the panel, my education and career path has been twisting and turning. I have my bachelor's, master's, and PhD all in speech and hearing sciences. I got my PhD at the Graduate Center, and my daughter is a proud graduate of City College, so yeah. I ended up, we can talk more about it later if you want, ended up starting my career at what was then called 9X, for those of you who are old enough to remember such a company.
I remember.
Which, after multiple mergers, became what we now know and love as Verizon. I had a 30-year career there, ending up as the Chief Information Officer, and again, lots of twists and turns. In the last few years there, of course, managing very large organization, you start to spend a lot of the time not just in execution, but worrying about talent development and who's coming up behind you and so on. And it was at that time that I started to take much stronger notice of something that had been, of course, around me all 30 years, but I was too busy working to pay attention to it. And that was the incredible lack of women in the technology organization. So I started to do some reading and fact-finding, not just about Verizon, but about the industry in general. And what I found out is nothing short of startling. I don't know any other word to use there. In the same 30 years, from around 1985 to 2015 that I was there, the participation of women in technology and computer science had actually dropped dramatically. So for those of you who don't know the data, back in 1985, if you looked at the percentage of the graduating classes in computer science, 35% of them were women back in 1985, and today that number is about 17 or 18%. Now that is, good, I heard a little bit of a rumble, because that is remarkable, because at the same time as the participation of women was taking a nosedive, of course, more and more of the job opportunities and the growth and the pervasiveness of tech in every field was going in exactly the opposite direction, skyrocketing. On top of that, the percentage of women that were making up the undergraduate ranks, like yourself, was also increasing. So you had this sort of perfect storm of, you know, the expression, go the direction the puck is going. We were not doing that because all the job growth and explosion and so forth was going up in tech, and the participation of women was going in the other direction. So the question is, why does it matter? It's a fair question. So quickly, it matters for 4 reasons. Number one, it's a sheer workforce numbers issue. The data says that we're graduating about 52% of the needed workforce at the undergraduate level in tech to fill the jobs. So it's pretty hard to figure out how you solve that problem if you literally have what makes up more than half of the undergraduate population, that is women, sitting on the sidelines. So from a pure numbers perspective, you can't get there from here if we don't get more women playing in that area. You know, you hear the term STEM all the time. So I just want to make the point that in those 4 disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and math, over the last 30 years, technology is the only one in which the participation of women has been going down. So think about that. Jobs are going there. Every field is being, you know, upended by tech. More and more women are going into life sciences, chemistry, physiology, all that good stuff, which is great. Even in engineering and math, the numbers are not fantastic, but they're creeping up. Only in computer science is the participation of women going down. So it matters from a pure workforce numbers perspective. It matters because every possible study that's ever been done shows that diversity in general and gender diversity in particular on teams produces better results. So even if you're looking at it purely from a capitalistic return on investment perspective, more women on the tech teams produce better results. It matters from an economic fairness perspective because all the data shows that the best paying jobs are in tech. And so if you want to go where the money is, you'll have a tech background. And last but not least, it matters purely from a leadership perspective. We need more women coming up the ranks to ultimately be leaders in these fields for a whole number of reasons. But if you just think about the fact that technology is reinventing every aspect of our lives, including our own biology in terms of biotech, in terms of the future of how we live and work. There's a very famous futurist named Ray Kurzweil who has the proposition that technology is the evolution of human biology. If you just think about that, as technology moves back into our bodies. So imagine that the whole future of the species, if you will, could be under the leadership of a single gender. It doesn't matter whether it's male or female. So decided it was time to try to do something about it and formed this initiative that we call WiTNY. It is very unique in that it's a public and private partnership. 2 flagship academic institutions, the City University of New York and Cornell Tech. For those of you who don't know much about Cornell Tech, it is an institute, graduate institute focused on tech and entrepreneurship with the goal of making New York really the tech ecosystem for the country. and a whole bunch of funding companies, Verizon being the founding funder of WiTNY, but we've got a whole bunch of other programs. And the goal is to, quite simply, increase the number of undergraduate and graduate women that are choosing to major and minor in computer science and tech-related fields. So how are we going to do that? There are three main components of the program. One has to do with curriculum, and that is reinventing, especially the introductory curriculum, in a way that actually encourages and incents more women like yourselves to take that first step, that first course, and get turned on to how incredibly empowering it is to be able to write software. Second is around scholarships, and so we have a whole WiTNY scholarship program. In fact, we just announced, I think it's 39 women across the CUNY colleges that will receive scholarships under this umbrella. Career opportunities. We have an internship program. Last summer we placed 30 interns across companies around New York, and we will be dramatically increasing that over the next few years. The developing a community like the women in this room, to support each other, to have professional women interacting with undergraduates interacting with graduate women, and so on, to create the kind of network you need to succeed. So I just want to say that Anne is my main squeeze at CUNY.
Proud of it.
An incredible partner, because as you can imagine, it takes a lot of change and change agents and investment and so on to move the needle across an institution as large as CUNY, but we are hell-bent on it, and hopefully there'll be some people in this room who walk into that first class.
Thanks to all three of you. I'm going to pose a couple of questions, and then we're going to open this up for Q&A. And I'll be bitterly disappointed. I probably will cry if there aren't any questions. So I hope while we're asking, don't you feel sad? You do, right? So while I'm asking some questions, I hope you'll be thinking about some questions that you would like to pose to Jane and Judy and Lauren. Tell us about some of the obstacles you encountered along the way and how you overcame them. Jane, why don't we start with you on that?
Okay, I have so many obstacles that I encountered. I get asked that question a lot, and I think one of the, and they were personal obstacles, things about myself that I had to improve and make better. And one of the important ones was, believe it or not, speaking in public. I remember a time where I'd be in a conference room with 5 or 6 people, and we'd have to go around and say our names, and it would be my turn, and it'd say, I'm Jane Chwick. It was awful. And somewhere along the line that changed. It changed actually not gradually, it changed in one session. And here's what happened. It's an amazing story. I was going to give a presentation to a group of 300 summer interns at Goldman Sachs. And that summer, and it's something I would have to do every year, and we'd have a lot of these types of presentations, and it always was a nervous wreck with the voice trembling. That year, my son was a summer intern at Goldman Sachs. He was going to be in the audience. And if you think that made me nervous, you had to see him. He was so upset. He was going to be so embarrassed. We were in a room like this one, and before it started, everybody kind of walked in. I was at the front, and I saw him walked in, and I watched him sit in the very last row, slumped all the way down, where all I could see was the top of his little head. And he was an intern, but to me, he was still had a little head. And I started talking. And I was talking to him and to everybody, but I would look at him every once in a while, and as I gave my talk, he started to sit up and sit up. And by the end of my session, my son was sitting straight up, tall, with a big smile on his face. And that was amazing for me. And I came out of there saying, wow, if my son thought I was okay, then I can't be too bad. ever since then, I go into every single presentation or conference room thinking about my son in that room. And recently, about a month ago, I was at a women's event, and the speaker was a professional marketing person who actually teaches people how to present. And the advice she gave to the women in the room, she said to them, make believe that your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, your cousin, or your son are in that room, and talk to them. And I was so happy to hear that, because it validated what I had felt, 15 years before that, because my son was a summer intern a long, long time ago. And that was a moment that changed me. And practice helps, and you have to prepare, but that was a very important obstacle for me to overcome, because people need to see you with confidence, yourself having confidence when you're speaking to them in front of an audience. So, but there are many other obstacles.
That's a great story. Lauren, I wonder if we might ask you what you see as some of the big trends in tech. Not so much specific technologies, but what fields are growing and how that's affecting their sectors.
Sure. So I have 2 points on this, and also would love for Jane and Judy to hop in as folks who've been in the field for so long, who have seen so many trends, who are still so engaged as professionals. Please feel free to hop in as well. But a couple of things. Just on a very high level, I think increasingly, even from when I started doing this work, there is an expectation in the field of tech that you are able to be very interdisciplinary. Not in every field, for sure, but there is increasing value, especially here in New York City, to have multiple perspectives when it comes to the work that you do if you're a tech professional. So what does that mean? I was talking to a company the other day who runs a web platform for selling art. And in all of their software developers, the number one question they ask is, why do you like art? What about art fascinates you and interests you? Because they have to have some understanding of the field that they're working in as they're building programs for the users who are looking for art. And increasingly, though always in tech understanding your user is absolutely essential, increasingly there's a interdisciplinary need when it comes to tech professions. We also see that on a technical level in general. In many cases, are there any computer science or tech or engineers in the room, just out of curiosity? Okay.
One?
This is a good point.
Yeah, okay.
Then I won't get too far into details, but essentially what we're hearing from a lot of employers, as Jane was alluding to, the field is changing so rapidly that it is necessary for you to know not just your one specialty of, say, front-end web design, which is using various programming languages to build a beautiful user-facing platform, but you also have to know a little bit of the layer that comes beyond that, so you can talk to various layers and communicate and get the data you need. So in general, I would just say there is an increasing trend towards interdisciplinary work. And if any of you are particularly interested in what that means from a skills perspective, just on Wednesday the city released a document that is a compilation of all of the employer feedback that we've received about what it takes to be a web engineer in particular. And you'll see that a lot of the skills in there are not technical languages, they're foundational skills that can be applied across a lot of different fields. So take a look at that. Our website is techtalent.nyc. Additionally, the other thing that I will say is that increasingly there is a strong focus on data, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. And that is really driving all sorts of insights and decision-making in every field. And what that means from a technical perspective is that there's a need for folks who not only know how to collect, store, and use data, so data scientists, data engineers, et cetera, but there's also a need within every field, be it marketing or customer service or policy making, for you to be a consumer of data and to be able to understand it enough and understand the principles of data analysis enough to be able to use that very powerful tool to understand how to better deliver services for your customers, for the people of New York, whoever that might be. So those are two trends that I would touch on, but if there are others as well.
Well, second the motion a couple of different ways. So data analytics and data science is huge, and sort of the horizon just beyond that is machine learning and cognitive computing. And it's as hot as it gets. It is, again, one of these interdisciplinary things. It involves a lot of statistics, a lot of data analytics, but also a lot of understanding about the way learning happens. So that's fascinating. I'm sure you all have heard of the term the Internet of Things, or IoT it's referred to. I've heard somebody a couple years ago say it's really the Internet of everything, not of things, because the first wave was where the Internet connected people. This next wave is Internet connecting things, your cars, your refrigerators, and so forth. But the truth is that it's really connecting things and people, and that's where the magic happens in terms of changing the fundamental way we live and work. And what that also means is a lot of the technology is becoming what's called embedded technology, meaning technology that's actually embedded in other devices, like your cars or your home appliances and so on and so forth, rather than being remote. The last thing is that, the comment about interdisciplinary, and Jane, you made an observation about the same thing. You really can't work in tech anymore by just being a technologist. You can't, the old way of doing things is that somebody who understood the business wrote down a set of requirements, and what they used to say was threw it over the fence, and the coders would code it up. But it was discovered a long time ago that that's a great way to have a failed project, because the people who are writing the code really have to fundamentally understand either the way the business or the way your users are going to experience the technology and so forth. So you have to be both interested in the domain you're thinking about working on, but also bring a mindset around what they call user-centered design or design thinking. And the people who are good at that are good at a lot of different things. Being good at writing software is necessary but not sufficient. And you're looking at a bunch of people who manage technology organizations by bringing other strengths to the table in addition to being able to understand the technology. So I think that's an established norm at this point.
By the way, if any of you ever go on NFL.com or have any interest in football, I actually started NFL.com. I did. Thank you. See? And the thing that I did at NFL.com that still continues to this day is the first time I went to a live football game, and I had never gone to a game before in my life. I'd never even watched one on TV. I sat in the press box, and I saw the guys were entering the plays, so-and-so threw, so-and-so caught, so-and-so gained yardage, and they're entering it on this computer. And I said, so this is 1994, I said, well, what do you do with that after you're done? And they looked at each other like that was a strange question. They said, oh, well, we upload it to the office. And I said, well, what if you put a thing out of that, and it went straight out on the internet, so that as soon as a play was made, the wonks who were watching back on their computer screens and their TV screens could see what was happening in real time. Well, it actually took an outsider to give them that idea, because they were so focused on the NFL as they knew it, that the idea of breaking the sort of boundaries of the television screen had never occurred to anybody. So anyway, it's the voice of diversity of points of view that somehow gives you another idea. Okay, but it's enough about me. How about a question for Jane? We have this astonishing group of future leaders in the room. We already know a lot of them are not specifically in tech. Why does it matter that they become fluent in tech?
It's a great question, and it's an extension of what Lauren and Judy both said. There is not a profession that I can think of that is not augmented and isn't changing because of technology. There isn't a piece of machinery, an appliance, a car, whatever it is, that has a battery associated that doesn't have software running on it, that doesn't have technology as part of it. And with that comes so many issues, opportunities, and things to think about, and that's across all disciplines and across all fields. And so we heard about data, right? We heard a little bit about design, but there's a whole cyber world out there. And even, if you're a doctor, you may think you don't need to think about cyber, but you do. If you're a lawyer and you want to try to figure out how to, ideas for winning the next case, having the ability to access technology, use technology, but understand what data can do for you in that makes you better at your job. More and more, every single profession will be automated, right? You can think about maybe 500 years from now, there's books out there about how people won't have jobs. Well, that's really far away from now. But in the meantime, jobs are being automated, and what's happening is it's the thought leadership part of the job that remains, right? It's the part that the computer can't necessarily do, not yet anyway. And so if you're going to be a doctor, right, the rote parts of your job may become automated. There's robotic, surgery that's already happening, but yet there are doctors, and the doctors that are doing better with the technology are going to be the best doctors, and the doctors who come up with the ideas, or the executives who come up with NFL.com ideas, because they're augmenting and they're making things more powerful with the technology that's out there. They're not the technologists building it, but they're generating those technical ideas. Those are the successful people of the futures in every discipline.
Judy, what have you learned about leadership on your journey?
Yeah, it's a great topic because I think everyone sort of struggles with or discovers over the course of their life where they fit on the leadership spectrum. I don't think anyone gets born and says, you could say I'm great at math, but not very many people grow up saying, I'm a leader, I'm going to be a leader. And so the question is kind of how do you get there? So let me say something and then come back to tech leadership in particular. What I have sort of discovered along the way is that there are a lot of ways to be a leader. And no single one of them is right or better than another. Somebody once described this to me, and it really rang true for me. There are people who do what's called leading from the front, right? Those are the visionary speech maker cheerleaders who have a team and they charge them all up and they charge up the hill and everyone follows because they are inspired by that kind of leader. And that's great. There are people who do what's called leading from behind, which in recent years has gotten a bad name, but I don't know why. And those are the people who, have a team and they know how to identify talent and they encourage and they mentor and they push everybody up to the top of the hill. Because of their enthusiasm and their belief in the team. And then there are people who lead from the middle and who surround themselves literally and figuratively with people who know what they don't know, who can build collaboration and so on. And everybody gets to the top of the hill and nobody quite knows how they got there. They just all feel good about having gotten there. And they're all perfectly fine. And what I've learned is that you've really got to figure out sort of what feels most comfortable for you. To try to say that there's only one way to do it, I have to be the rabble-rouser cheerleader, and then not be able to pull it off or do it in an inauthentic way won't work, and vice versa for all of those. So the key is to sort of sit with yourself. And when you're in a situation and there's an opportunity to lead, figure out which one of those styles of leadership actually feels and resonates with who you are, because authenticity is really the thing that matters, and go with it. In terms of tech leadership, I'll say this, and this is why I think it's to some extent sort of our time as women. We all know about the command and control model of leadership. And that was great. That was born in the industrial era, where factory floors were being created and there were big bureaucratic organizations. Everybody had to know exactly what they were supposed to do. The leader was always knew more. Sort of information is power. The leader always knew more and held it up at the top. And so you had to have a certain kind of personality in order for that to work. And it was appropriate for the needs of the economy at that time. But in the digital world, or what gets referred to as the knowledge economy, it's almost never the case that the person at the top knows more than the people who worked for them. And in fact, it's the person at the top who can create a collaborative environment and get people sharing information, because new information is new value. Those are the kinds of leaders that are the most successful in the digital age. And that's a skill that I think, not that men don't have it too, but that comes very naturally to women. So I would just encourage people to sort of appreciate that skill. It's not a soft skill, it's a hard skill, and realize that you can leverage that in your careers.
So these are three women with whom I have the pleasure of working very closely. Lauren, your leadership at Tech Talent Pipeline has been enormously helpful to CUNY and to me as we increase the participation of women and provide opportunities for all of our students. Jane, your service at Queens College is so much appreciated, and we're so glad to have you back in a leadership position at Queens. And Judy, I work with pretty much every day on the evolution of this WiTNY project. I would like to invite you now to stand up at the microphone and do that really scary thing of ask a question. If you don't, I can keep asking another couple of questions, but I hope we will have one or two questions, and if you will come to the mic and tell us your name and your campus, it would be much appreciated. Oh, we've got someone at the mic. So exciting. Thank you.
Is it on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Lisa, and I go to SPS, which is the School for Professional Studies. And to me, the question isn't why technology is important. That's completely self-evident. What I'm interested in is why the disconnect? Why are there not more women involved? And what do we do to address that? Thank you.
Who wants to start?
Well, I'll start because this is what we've been pondering in this whole program. There are a couple of theories out how we got here. One is at the young. Well, first of all, we know that to the extent that girls are unfortunately trend away from math and science and so on, that's sort of part of the factor. Around the time that the numbers started to go down, which is in the late 80s, early 90s, is coincident with the time that PCs entered the home. And it seems that those first personal computers were bought as toys for the boys in the home. And they started to play games, and the whole gaming industry grew, and they got fascinated with it and tinkered and took it apart and so on. And it became identified as the toy in the house for the boys, and the girls went elsewhere. And it's the coincident timing of that I think started the larger issue, which is sort of the sort of role model stereotyping culture issue. We have a brand issue. When anybody thinks about a software developer, and I say close your eyes and think about people in tech, who do you think about? You think about guys, typically smelly, pimply guys in their basements by themselves. That's the stereotype. And so who wants to join that group, And we think about role models like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and on and on and on. So and then of course, once that flywheel gets going, then you get a real stereotyping, much of which is wrong, about what it's like to work in tech. And it's a snowballing effect. So we have to figure out ways to turn back each one of those sort of factors.
We hear from CUNY women all the time who go into a computer science class and they're the only woman, or maybe there's one other. So even, aside from the longer term issues of why it's happened, we're at a point now where the women don't feel that they have a place in that computer science class. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay, another question?
Hello, my name is Maria Lovejoy from Hostos Community College. And my question is, how, for those of us who aren't in technology but understand it's an integral part of different fields, how do we gain the knowledge or the information we need to, intertwine that in what we're doing? Thank you.
I will take one quick stab at this. So, great question. The ability to understand and pick up tech skills has been radically democratized as the internet and other developments have proliferated. So what we find from employers is they say that what they look for in a candidate is someone who not has a degree in CS, but who is smart and knows how to get things done. And the reason that they say that is because now more and more there are more people entering tech or entering any field who are able to get tech skills outside of the traditional pathways. Whether it's understanding or taking a look at Code Academy and understanding how tech languages work in various different fields, or being able to access increasingly more accessible blogs and periodicals and magazines, periodicals, gosh, that's dated, about the implications of tech in your field. More and more you're very much able to do that and able to find that if you are able to access the internet or any other resources. So those are some. There are many more. And some good resources, you can both check out our website. But in general, there's also a number of sources that have done a great job across the internet of aggregating all of these various free resources. Bento.io is one of them. But yeah, it's increasingly more available.
I want to add a little bit to that from a City University plug point of view. I think that although you might be afraid to go take Comp Sci 101, right? Maybe you should try it. But if you're afraid, I know at Queens College, and I would imagine the other colleges have something similar, some of the other departments do offer some forms of computer science classes. So at Queens College, for example, the sociology department has an interdisciplinary program on data. And so if you went and took a data class at Queens College from that source, it might be a lot less scary. It's similar to, I think in a lot of majors, you take a stats class, right? So you should view it from that point of view. And so go back to your schools and look at the other departments' entry into computer science classes that might be a little bit less scary for you to attain that education.
Hello, I'm Zakia Mahabub. I'm from LaGuardia Community College. Thanks for having me here. And yes, I'm proud that I'm one of those 39 WiTNY scholars. So I'm a WiTNY scholar myself. Thank you so much, Judith. I'm very glad to see you here. So my question to the panelists is, I'm also a computer science major, and I'm graduating from LaGuardia next semester. So my question is, how you actually, because all of you didn't mean that, okay, I'll be in a tech career, right? So you switched from a different major, or you switched from your educational foundation to something else. Especially Dr. Jen, when you were talking about that you didn't like the computer science, the programming class at all, but then you started your career with it. So how was the transition between your foundation major-based education and your career when you chose it?
I'll take that, because I have to tell you, I barely know any professions where if you major in what it is you're going to go do for a living, that you start out knowing anything. So there's an enormous disconnect between what you learn in school. If you go to law school, you're not ready to be a lawyer as soon as you come out. And if you can major in computer science, even if I had majored in computer science, when I came out, I would not have hit the ground running at EDS. It just doesn't happen. That no matter what you're learning, it's still a foundation to the next thing. And yes, if I had majored in computer science, it might have made that training program a bit easier for me. but I would have still needed to go through that training program. So don't think that there is an immediate, like, you come out with your degree and you open the door, and if you're doing exactly the same thing, you're ready to run. You're not. You're going to be crawling. And you should be ready for that, and you should expect it, anticipate it, want it, and know that one day you're going to be running.
Internships are incredibly important. I know we have a mic on the right-hand side as well, so I think we should take a question from there. But I do want to put in a plug for the WiTNY website, which is CUNY/WiTNY, WiTNY, and we'll put up some of those resources that we've been talking about today there. So over to the right side.
Thank you. I was actually thinking of us switching. Thank you. My name is Razia Arabi. I am from Queensborough Community College. And my question is extracted from your discussion and also previous questions. I am beginning, because it was interesting when Judith shared about the statistics of women in technology has been declining. And then looking also in the room, how many people actually raise their hand being in that field, it's also very minimum. And what I hear, there is a gap. And for me, because I'm a little bit different from the traditional students, I'm coming back to school, so this is a detour for me to discover something newly, and I've been in the workforce. There is a gap, there is a missing, where we cannot connect and touch upon all the talents that are out there. So this is actually a challenge, and it may not be just a question. How can we, as leaders, touch upon that gap so that we can ensure closing that and creating new opportunities that really can invest, and this is for future, this is for our future, that we can expand this opportunity and really looking at growing and developing a society that will be the direction for our future. So this is for anyone or all of you. Thank you.
Well, so I think it's a great challenge. I think it's a couple of thoughts on that. The first is, I think that an introduction to computer science should be a requirement for every single undergraduate student. Just like you have to take core courses in English and in the humanities and so on, having some idea about how software gets written is basic literacy at this point. And if you did that, even though it's a huge challenge in terms of resources and so on, if you did that, just like I like to use the argument, how many kids graduate high school and say they're going to major in anthropology? Probably not that many, but we all have to take some of those humanities classes, and a certain percentage say, oh man, that was cool. I never would have imagined that I would be interested in that. And the same thing will happen if every one of the 250,000 undergraduates at CUNY, 136,000 women, take an intro to computer science class, especially if it's well designed in terms of being welcoming. That is to say, all the exercises don't have to do with building robots and sports statistics, as an example. If you do that, a representative sample of women will say that was cool. So here's a number, and this is nationwide and at CUNY. The percentage of undergraduate women who major in computer science, not of the computer science classes, of the entire population, only 1% of the undergraduate population of females majors in computer science, probably is represented in this room. About 6% of the undergraduate men major in computer science. If you increase that 1% by only a few percent to 3 or 4%, you would come close to doubling the number of tech workers in this country and at CUNY, and you would effectively, quote unquote, solve the problem. So I think that's where we have to start.
Can I just add one thing to that? Sure. Because I think what Judy said is absolutely true, but it's not true of everyone. And from a city perspective, we also are thinking about how do we serve the people who are not in colleges or who don't have access to that particular avenue of training. And step one is a matter of not even being able to obtain the skills, but even know what the skills are that are actually needed and where the gaps actually are. And the solution for that is actually, not surprisingly, technology. That's why the city has invested in things like expanding broadband access across all corners of the 5 boroughs. This not only helps to increase digital literacy skills, but also unlocks so many educational resources, unlocks opportunities to access the economy and opportunities to earn a living online. So technology can solve that gap as well. The other thing is really perception issue. We need a mobilization campaign that has been alluded to before that tells people how easy it is to become, or what these careers are and how easy it is to become them. The same way that you understand by age of 4 or 5 what a doctor is, that you have to go to a lot of school in order to become a doctor. We need folks from a very young age to understand what these careers are and to want to pursue them. And that's not just in tech, that's having a more expansive view of what opportunities are in general through our educational system. And one of the ways that the city has tried to tackle that is by launching something called Computer Science for All. So by 2025, every single public school student in New York from grades K through 12 is going to be able to access computer science education. And what this will do is start to deconstruct some of the myths that Judy alluded to before, that technology is not something that women can do, should do, can use for any particular social purpose. So beyond just meeting people where they are who are looking to explore various careers, you have to start much earlier and employ technology to be able to help do that.
So Judy's idea of CS all at the City University of New York is really a natural extension of what is already happening in K-12. So your younger sisters and brothers are going to be doing this in your New York City public schools. Another question here.
My name is Judith, and I'm from the Graduate Center at the University of New York. And my question is actually a follow-up question, because we've already talked about like how the women participation is so less, and also the gap. So I was wondering, I mean, I'm a biology major, and I know a little bit of computer, like coding and like statistics, like programming like R or Python, but I'm not very good at it. So how would I fit into tech industry? And like, is the gap basically like not having enough of the entry-level job? Because when we look at job, like they ask for like 5 or 7 years of experience in computer science, plus like all the other skills that I have, then like it's really hard for me to then go and enter into the market. So how do I go about and get a job in such situation?
I just want to say one thing. I'm sure you're better than you just said you are. This is an amazing statistics. Girls drop out of computer science classes and majors with higher grades than boys who stay in them. Beyond that, biotech is as hot as it gets, so I can't imagine that if you go into the biotech field with your biology and the experience you have in tech, that you have a problem. I think you're in good shape.
Each of your schools should have a career center that should be helping you. I realize that it's a little bit scary getting that first job, but the reality is out there that there are enormous amounts of jobs out there for starting out and experienced, and it all depends what channels you go to find those jobs. And so if you go to many of the standard job sites on the web, you're right, a lot of those are less about finding an entry level, but there are internships, and I would recommend trying to get an internship and really work closely with your career center at your school, because they're there to help you, and they want you to succeed.
And remember, there are 31,000 CUNY alums working in tech in New York. So somebody out there is going to be in a field or a company that somehow aligns with yours, and that's the moment for you to say, I'm planning to shine and I need your help. And people will respond. So work that network. Do we have another question here?
Yes, thank you. Firstly, thank you so much to all of you for offering your advice. My name is Nicolette. I'm a sophomore at the Macaulay Honors College at Baruch College. And my question is, what advice can you offer us as women leaders who possibly struggle to find their voices in sometimes rooms full of men? Because I've found myself in that situation where I was in a room full of men who are sort of used to a different order, and it's sort of very intimidating for some of us. So what advice can you give?
I bet all of our panelists would like to address that one. You want to start, Lauren?
Sure, absolutely. So I just want to say the best advice I ever got, period, in my career has been from a woman named Pat Falcone, who led the White House's national security science efforts. And she has been in so many rooms where she has been the only woman and has had to advocate for stances that mean life or death in many cases. And her advice was, first of all, look to work with the best people working on the hardest problems, just generally, which was great advice. And two, don't be afraid to be perceived as a failure or insignificant, because most of the time that perception that you have of yourself is what prevents you from saying the things that actually are so valuable and will move the conversation forward. Part of it is being able to be brave enough to break into a conversation that is not welcoming for you. But once you do, don't let the fear of your comments being perceived as less than valuable to be able to stop you from doing that. It's really important.
First of all, I'm going to say, try not to notice. Okay? Try not to pay attention to the fact that you're the only woman in the room, and because you'll always be the only something in the room. Okay, so so it shouldn't bother you. You shouldn't sit there and say, what makes me different? Just you're there because of your skill set and your capabilities, or else you wouldn't be in that room. So having that confidence is enormous. Second of all, I find a very important way to get people to listen to you is to start asking questions, almost like as if you were a lawyer, even if you know the answers. And sometimes, more importantly, even if you don't know the answers or you don't understand something somebody is saying, chances are very high that what they're explaining doesn't make any sense and everybody else is afraid to ask the questions. So don't be afraid to ask the questions, and then you start getting comfortable participating in that way. And the last part of this is, here's a really important point. If you don't say what you have to say, then you're being selfish, right? And if you look at it that way, as opposed to being afraid to be rude or to intrude, if you look at it and say, if they don't hear my opinion, if they don't hear a different way of looking at that issue, then I am stopping them from doing something better. And that's being selfish. And if you get that in your head, again, back to I said I had a lot of obstacles, this was one of them. If you get that in your head of you really need to talk and you're doing what you're supposed to do in your role by talking and contributing and not paying attention to being different, then you'll get over it.
So that's all great advice. Let me give you a little practical tip, which is if you're in a meeting, speak up early in the meeting. The more minutes that go into the meeting where you haven't said anything and the rest of the people have, the harder it gets to make that first statement because you feel like it has to be brilliant. And people will look at you like, oh, I didn't even know you were there. So say something early on. I also always find that it's disarming when you're willing to say, okay, I don't know anything about that, but here's what I do know about, because men in general are not as willing to own up to what they don't know, but it's an incredibly valuable skill. In fact, it's critical as a leader, because if you're trying to bluff your way through everything, then you won't surround yourself with people who know more than you do. But you said you were from Baruch, so it caused me to, I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. On November 30th at Baruch, the WiTNY program is running something we call Java Talk, which is, think of it as mentor for a morning, or mentoring speed dating. If you don't have to be a tech major, but if you have an interest in it, you can sign up, and we're going to be bringing in 50 or 60 or so tech professionals, and you can have little 30-minute mentoring sessions. And then you might establish a relationship with someone who can sponsor you and help develop your confidence. So go online and look for it. It's called Java Talk on November 30th.
Thank you.
I'm looking for Pat. Are we okay to keep going, Pat? Yes?
I'll be next.
Could we do 2 more questions? Okay, one from the right and then one from the left.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Antoine, and I am a social work major, and a lot of things that we have learned is that there are a lot of systematic issues that may have impacted an individual's life. So my question is to you guys, since you guys had formidable experiences in the technology field, what are some ways that technology have helped to change the system?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question. So there are a couple of things. How technology has helped change the system. The de Blasio administration, for instance, when we talk about tech and why tech is important to the city as a whole, we focus on three things. One, talent, so that is our line of work. We hear from companies that they don't have the talent they need to be able to grow, and we hear from people that they don't have the skills they need to be able to access jobs. We also focus on access, and the reason we focus on access, as I mentioned before, broadband and other ways of accessing fast internet speeds and digital literacy, is that that unlocks so many opportunities to overcome systemic challenges. The problem is that right now, those resources are concentrated for a number of reasons, including infrastructure and other things, really systemic issues, in a small cluster of areas across the city. And the goal is really to expand that to every corner, because if you do, you will allow people, as I mentioned before, to access education, economic opportunity, and so much more. Additionally, just from a learning perspective, the ability to use and access technology to learn in your home when it comes to a technical perspective. So we oftentimes, for our programs, have pre-learning that's done at home, which allows individuals to manage their other commitments that they might have. Since there are things that are systemic that do prevent some individuals from accessing tech training once it's open. For instance, things like needing childcare, which is not widely available and affordable. So being able to use technology to diversify where you find that talent and access to that skills, rather, is very important. The third thing is help to spur innovation generally with Internet of Things and other initiatives, helping to build smart cities where the city gets better at service delivery, where the city becomes more accessible to users in terms of finding information. That's all part of a digital playbook that's been developed by the city. And the goal really is to help break down barriers to gathering information and gain more equality. I don't know if that answers your question exactly of how I've seen it play out in my career, but that's certainly how we're thinking about the use of technology to break down systemic barriers to individuals who want to access.
I also forgot to say that I'm a student from your college.
Thank you, thank you. One more question over here.
Yes, I am from Lehman College. My name is Michelle. I'm also a CUNY grad, and I now work at Lehman. And one of the things that I see all the time when students come to me with research ideas or projects that are not necessarily rooted in tech, but could move to the next level with just a little infusion of tech. There are lots of us mentoring students right now, the students who are budding professionals right now who probably are not in the tech field, but they're at a space where they can fully invest in tech if they have the right mentorship. What are we doing to mentor the mentors so that more students can organically branch off into tech instead of replacing themselves into a tech field when they're already immersed and really good at what they do in other subject matters? Thank you.
I think the short answer is we're not doing enough. We are doing some things, and I think, for instance, of the creation over the last year of something called the CUNY Tech Consortium. I know some of my colleagues are in the audience, that for the first time, we're having a coordinated conversation across CUNY to try and bring people together to share experiences. I think about the work that we're doing for internships across all of CUNY. And by the way, most of the interns who came through the WiTNY program last year actually ended up getting either offers for a second summer or offers for full-time jobs through that. So the last thing is the creation of something called the CUNY Tech Meetup, which launched last year and now has 1,000 members across CUNY, where really every week or every 2 weeks there's another event that's open to CUNY mentors and also to CUNY students to go and visit a company, to see what's happening out in the field, to explore a specific technology. So there's lots of, I guess what I would call green shoots, areas where you can see that there's an effort throughout many of the CUNY campuses. And what we're trying to do, and I represent the Chancellor's office here, is try and coordinate those and make them as accessible to as many CUNY students and mentors as possible. So, and here technology is our friend because we can reach out to so many of you directly through email, texting, et cetera. So I'd like to, I think we should end here, and you certainly did not disappoint me at the microphone, so thank you very, very much for that. And please join me in thanking these three fantastic women for sharing their experience. And go and register for a computer science class.
Yeah.